In front of you is an assortment of characters ranging from charismatic leader, murderer, dictator, to savior. Now, if I asked you what brings all of these characters together, it might take you a while to notice that this isn't what they're typically referred to as. So the question is, which traits or titles would you label them with instead? I believe that if we're able to answer this question, we can discover not only the true meaning behind good and evil, but also what it means to be human, and more precisely, what being a good person means for you. When we think of what makes a character evil, we tend to focus on the evil traits they possess and the wrong deeds they've committed as a consequence. But instead of getting caught up in the branches, the obvious traits, the actions on the surface, I want to go deeper. I want to get to the root of evil. And when you really break it down, that root is selfishness. Now, when you invert that tree and flip the entire structure, what you find at the root of pure good is selflessness. To give you some context, think of a few seemingly good actions, but with a twist. Donating to charity just to be praised, helping a friend to feel superior, telling the truth, but with the intention of hurting someone. On the outside, it all looks good, but in reality, it's like pouring dirty water into a clean glass. The act might look pure, but it's contaminated at the core, because the intention is what defines good and evil, not just the action. And at the heart of that intention is this: are you doing it for yourself or for someone else? Apart from that, humans are mostly, and I say mostly, all on the same page when it comes to which traits are generally seen as good and bad. For example, the 7 deadly sins, no, not that, the Eightfold Path, the 10 Commandments, or Aristotle's virtue ethics. They all echo the same notions, even though one could argue that they're still rooted in the fine concept of selfishness and selflessness. But what if one were to betray those concepts of good and evil for a greater cause, something shown by Lelouch in his duel against this guy?
I have a question for you, Lord Guilford. What do you do when there is an evil you cannot defeat by just means? Do you stain your hands with evil to destroy evil? Or do you remain steadfastly just and righteous even if it means surrendering to evil?
In the name of Cornelia, I choose justice!
I understand. In my case, I commit evil to destroy the greater evil!
Yes, your highness.
This is known as the greater evil paradox, and at the heart of that concept lies the question, would you commit the lesser evil to extinguish the bigger evil? Do the ends justify the means? Imagine a set of train tracks. On the one side, you have 5 men tied up, and on the other, just 1. The train is headed toward the 5 people. In front of you, there's a lever to change the direction of the train. So let me ask you, would you pull the lever, save the 5 people, and thereby become a murderer, or would you just stand there? In this example, a lot of people would pull the lever, but obviously, there's no right or wrong answer. Now, imagine a second scenario. You're on a bridge over the tracks, standing next to a very large person, but this time, you can push the large person off the bridge to stop the train and save the 5 people, or you can do nothing. So let me ask you again, would you push the person and save the 5 people? You probably feel a bit more hesitant this time because you got closer to feeling like a bad person. Now be honest, how would your judgment change if the person you were pushing was either male or female, a CEO or a beggar, a parent, a kid, or an old person, or a person you not only know, but someone actually very close to you, a good friend or a parent? Raising the stakes, making the situation more personal, shows us how our responses change based on how much we're involved. If your friend was the one person on the tracks, you'd most likely want to save him, so you'd just stand there watching. This example is interesting because it shows you how much you value different people or demographics. It shows that even though we convince ourselves we're objective and neutral, whenever we get personally involved, we let our emotions dictate our actions. I wanted this example to show you that selfishness doesn't only mean material gain, it also includes other people, which can be confusing since we're talking about the self, but in the end, it's your self that yearns for connection with these people. which is why in this example, you wouldn't want to cut that connection through death. But back to my point, whenever you do evil for a selfless cause, that apparently makes you good. Even if you betray the common wisdom of good and evil, as long as the ends are worth it, they can justify the means. Although I don't want to claim that anyone can ever know with 100% certainty where that line is, when the means are and when they aren't justified. Now imagine committing such a great amount of evil that the end couldn't justify the means. All of that for a pair of wings. Griffith is a character who perfectly represents Nietzsche's idea of master morality. For context, Nietzsche said there are two types of morality in this world. Slave morality is born out of weakness. It's the morality of people who have no power, so they try to flip the script. They say, being powerless makes me virtuous. It's resentment turned into a belief system, a coping mechanism for the fact that you can't fight back, so instead you call fighting evil. Then you have master morality, the morality of people who don't need permission, who don't ask, is this good or bad? They ask, does this serve me in any way? That's exactly what Griffith does, and I believe that using this approach can help us answer the question that so many people fight over. Is Griffith evil? He doesn't justify his dream through guilt or faith or morality. He doesn't pretend he's noble. He just wants his goal. He wants his dream, and he's willing to burn the entire world to get it. Now, let's rewind a bit. Griffith starts off as a nobody, a simple kid playing in the streets with the wish of having his own kingdom. He builds an army called the Band of the Hawk, and one by one they follow him. And if we had to define why they do so exactly, it would probably come down to the trait of charisma. He believes in something so much he becomes magnetic. He believes in something, and that belief makes the others believe in him. He wins battle after battle, climbs the ranks, and eventually the king of Midland recognizes his efforts, and a mere commoner is now a count. And after a couple of more wins, the Band of the Hawk now turns into the White Hawk Knights, the strongest military of Midland. He is so close to his goal of having his own kingdom, but then he loses the one person that was able to distract him from that very dream, the one person that treated him like a normal person, the one who made him think he could live a normal life. And so he makes a mistake, and I guess I don't need to tell the entire story, but basically Griffith loses everything, robbed of his greatest tools, his voice, his looks, and his body. Griffith can only observe, incapable of doing anything. The only thing he has left is his dream in his mind, one that he cannot make a reality anymore. To make matters worse, the people that he took for granted, the ones who looked up for him, run over to Guts, including Casca, the very person that would have thrown her life away without a second doubt for Griffith. That's when the eclipse happens, when Griffith is at his lowest, when he's offered a choice to sacrifice what is dear to him to reach his dream. And he does it, because to Griffith, his kingdom is worth more than anything else in this world, and he justifies it because all the lives that have been sacrificed before, they would eventually lose meaning if he were to stop now. So in his twisted morality, he's continuing for them. They lived for his dream, and now they will die for it too. And after the grotesque horror that was the eclipse, Griffith has the chance to make a wish come true, and instead of getting his own kingdom or wishing for the lives of his comrades, he wishes for a pair of wings. I don't think I need to get into detail about how that wish represents pure selfishness and hedonism. The question is, does that mean ambition is bad? Does striving for something greater equal selfishness? The reason Griffith works so well as a character is because he shows us what unbound ambition can do. Oftentimes, we wish we were more ambitious, had dreams to pursue of our own, and would dedicate ourselves to them, be willing to sacrifice everything for them. So when a man actually does that, when he actually sacrifices everything that was dear to him, we either hate him or completely defend him. What many people get wrong, in my opinion, is that Griffith didn't care about the Band of the Hawk, which is simply untrue. Not only have there been numerous moments throughout the series, but the conditions to becoming an apostle are to sacrifice something precious to you, as seen with other characters. You cannot sacrifice something you don't hold dear. You sacrifice what you want for what you want most, something dear to you for something you care about even more. And through that ritual of the eclipse, by putting a person to their lowest and making them commit cruel, selfish deeds, they let them lose their sense of mercy and other good emotions. It's being portrayed as if the eclipse is meant to be a ritual that kills off every piece of goodness in a person's heart. Some people might say that it kills off humanity in a person, but I try to avoid that term as far as possible because of its broad definition. Humans embody good and evil at the same time. You will never meet a person that is purely good, nor vice versa. A person doing absolutely horrible atrocities is thereby not inhumane. In fact, it's, if I'm allowed to say so, peak humanity, or human nature at its finest. As Schopenhauer states, the will of man is selfishness itself. And without trying to sound like an absolute Griffith simp, I just want to remind you that Griffith was at his lowest point. He was incapable of moving. He literally was not even a walking, but a conscious corpse. What I find funny with many people is that oftentimes they will condemn other people, especially in fiction, for their wrong actions, when they would literally do the same. We search for all the bad things somebody else does while ignoring everything bad in ourselves, which shows us that we humans in our essence are completely hypocritical. We often see the hero who sacrifices himself for the group, the guy who takes the bullet, characters who are okay with suffering for a greater cost or for other people. And when seeing these characters on screen, we delude ourselves into thinking that we would act the same. But how can we ever truly know if we haven't been in that exact situation? How do we know that we are a good person when we haven't been through the same circumstances? Because whenever we see characters who aren't heroes and just humans, we immediately hate on them for not being the way we want them to be. They remind us of our own flaws, our own humanity, like a mirror. They show us the parts of ourselves we don't like to admit. It's like they're slightly trying to wake us up to reality. And often the characters that are portrayed in media aren't the status quo. Lelouch isn't your average 17-year-old, Guts isn't the average adult, and Shinji isn't your average teen. They all go through situations that the majority of us can only dream of. And yet, when a character doesn't act like an idealized version of ourselves, we immediately hate on them and say, well, in my opinion, or I would have, or why didn't he just do XYZ? Maybe some people just need to be a bit more honest with themselves. And sorry for the rant, but to make my point, I'm not defending Griffith's actions, nor am I saying that they are justified. What I'm saying is that it's unfair to call Griffith a monster, to call him inhumane, when that very monster lives inside of every single one of us. Calling Griffith inhumane would be unjust. He is the monster that we know as mankind. Essentially, what happens to Griffith is that he loses himself in the fine line between the greater evil paradox. Quote, we lie best when we lie to ourselves, end quote. Griffith isn't the bad guy in his story. To him, it isn't selflessness that matters, but his goal, because to him, his goal is the ultimate good, even though we, the audience, know that it's purely selfish. I want wings says it all. As long as it is sacrificed for his dream, it is justifiable, no matter how cruel or disgusting the deed is. We see this perfectly illustrated in this panel. I guess it's because they themselves chose to fight. That's just the way I am. It's a blood-smeared dream after all. I have neither regret nor remorse about that. But for hundreds, thousands of lives to hang in the balance, and myself alone not to be unclean. What I want won't enter my grasp so easily as that. I'll keep winning to fulfill my dream to which they clung, putting their lives on the line. In this panel, Griffith realizes that his dream is something he can only attain if he can become something close to the devil himself, needing to throw away his mercy and doing evil. And that is exactly what Femto embodies, the idealized version of Griffith, the one that is purely fixated on their dream, and that is okay with whatever means it takes. He decides what's right and what's wrong, not the world. He makes himself the axis the universe should revolve around. That is not just confidence, it's arrogance. Arrogance so bloated it becomes dangerous, because what he's really saying is, I don't care what's destroyed as long as I get what I want. And it reminds me of Milton's devil in Paradise Lost. Better to reign in hell than to serve in heaven. That's the essence of arrogance. It's the essence of evil. Not just believing you're right, but believing you deserve to rule no matter the cost. Griffith doesn't just embody embody that idea. He is the devil of Kentaro Miura's story. And it's not just about his dream. Things always need to go his way. As he states in chapter 36, "Do you want to go? Is that how badly you want to leave my grasp? No, you can't. I won't have it, I won't let you." If the instant our swords meet, the pressure from his altering the arc of mine even just a little, I might really kill him. But even then, if I can't have him, I don't care. In this scene, Griffith shows us that if Guts doesn't want to serve him for his dream, he doesn't care whether he's alive or dead. Even when it comes to what he probably considers his best friend, still the only thing that matters is his dream. And in Griffith's eyes, Guts' worth dies completely if he can't be in his grasp. This is what happens when a person believes their goal matters more than life itself. Uncontrolled ambition, ruthless self-centeredness, a god complex disguised as purpose. But enough on that. Because assuming being selfish is good, and morality is just a coping mechanism for the weak, where does that put kindness? Wouldn't it be interesting to see what happens when a person doesn't choose being good because they are weak or delusional, but because of a deeper inner driving force? Why is it that certain characters choose being virtuous despite being strong? Why is it that a character like Thorfinn chooses pacifism over power? It isn't because of morality or weakness, but because of peace. Peace with himself. Thorfinn lived a life of killing, focused on his goal of vengeance. What he then realized is that that is exactly what's making him empty. And now he's like an empty shell. His purpose, Askeladd, is gone. What's funny is that even though Thorfinn has the necessary skill and strength to defeat Askeladd, it feels like he doesn't get closer to beating him. Ironically, the further we progress in the story and the more skilled of a fighter Thorfinn becomes, the less the likelihood increases that Thorfinn beats Askeladd. I remember when I saw this moment that I just thought to myself, the author is trying to tell us Thorfinn needs Askeladd. He doesn't defeat him not because he can't, but because his survival instinct doesn't want him to. A part of him doesn't want to lose his reason for existence, and a part of him knows that Thorfinn is defined only through his vengeance, and that there is no way to move the goalpost. Once Askeladd is dead, he's dead. He can't advance his goal. To make this make sense, it isn't like with a financial goal where you can aspire to 10k, then to 100k, and eventually a million and so on, or with the gym where you can always increase the weight. It's a goal that, once fulfilled, leaves its holder empty. As I mentioned, once Askeladd is defeated, his goal is achieved. And that is the problem with vengeance. I don't necessarily think that Thorfinn realizes that, not even subconsciously. It just feels more like a narrative function or a thematic device, something the author intentionally uses to show us that this would mark the end, that he wants to prolong the story just a little longer, until he just slaps us in the face with this scene. In psychology, it is said that a human's identity, the very essence of the self, is shaped by their goal. All of a person's actions, habits, emotions, and thoughts revolve around that goal, like the earth revolving around the sun. So when Thorfinn loses that goal, shallow and empty as it was, what is he now? Which is literally what the first opening, being titled Emotionless, or let me try this, Mukanjyo, asks. Can someone tell me how I used to picture the scenes that I used to dream of? I can't seem to feel a thing from this scenery. The more I look back, the more I feel like the person I am is empty inside. So what do you do when you're an empty, directionless barrel? You choose a goal, a better one that reshapes your identity from the ground up. Many people claim that Thorfinn changed because of the horrors of the battlefield, that he realized his actions were wrong. But that raises the question, and this has been a common critique point for the series. Why is he the only warrior to feel that way? But what if the changing factor for Thorfinn wasn't guilt or redemption at all? I'd argue that it could have been his goal, or more precisely, the loss of it, that forced his internal transformation. Because by choosing the goal of finding Vinland and making that the center of his identity, identity. He made everything else revolve around it. His thoughts, actions, beliefs, morals, and all the other good stuff that comes in between. His entire character took such a drastic change because he had to adapt to his new goal. So does that mean we can only ever be truly good if we neglect ourselves, or that selfishness is bad after all? And this is where I want to finish talking about Thorfinn, because there is more than enough material out there that discusses his character in detail and in more depth, and probably way better than me right now. But back to my question, is selfishness pure evil? A clear argument for the opposite of that is Kaneki. Kaneki believes a good person is someone who would rather be stomped on than hurt someone else. To him, violence is inherently wrong. Rather than be a person who causes pain, he'd rather be the one in pain. And after putting this philosophy to the test and watching it crumble when Jason tortures him horribly, he changes. At first, we think it's for the better. He can finally stand up for himself. But what we later realize is that he's gone to the other extreme and is now no less of a monster than Jason. He became exactly what he feared and what he hated most. And that is the point. It's about finding balance, that sweet spot between selfishness and selflessness, and that there is no black and white answer for the question, should you be selfless or selfish? But the story dives into that theme perfectly. Through Kaneki's different character arcs, through the different phases of life and stages that he goes through, he shows us how he reacts in which situation, when it's right and when it's wrong, and what we can learn from it. But in summary, what the story teaches us is that we should be both, by choosing a selfless goal that fulfills you and being selfish about it, because we see what happens when you choose a selfish life without a goal, without direction. And the character that portrays this best, in my opinion, is Ymir from Attack on Titan. Ymir is a person who knew the truth about the world of Shingeki no Kyojin all along. She lived across the sea in Marley, used as a puppet to act as the incarnation of the founder Ymir. And she played that role since it guaranteed her survival, until eventually the Marleyan forces find the sect and ask her, "Are you Ymir?" Her subordinates want their leader to survive and tell her to talk herself out of it, but she doesn't. She decides she wants to be selfless and be there for her people, to do something good, trying to make herself accountable, trying to make her people look innocent, but she fails. She and her people are turned into titans. And for 40 years, she lives as a mindless titan until she's presented with the chance of her life and eats a shifter. Gifted with a new life, she now swears to live these 13 short years she's been given to the fullest. At this point, she doesn't care about the general norms of good and evil. In the twisted world of Attack on Titan, morality doesn't play a role. She just does what benefits her. Steal, rob, lie, all for the sake of living a selfish, fulfilling life, till she hears of a person who endured a similar upbringing to hers, a person who lives a fake life under a fake identity. Following that person, she ends up in the Survey Corps, and after a number of events, she's again presented with a decision, living for herself or dying for others. And even though she swears she's never going to live a life for someone else again, she acts selflessly, in an attempt to rescue someone who mattered to her. And then, even after making it out there alive and being reminded of her own philosophy, she goes so far as to sacrifice her life for other people. People who she doesn't even care that much about, just because she pities them, because she knows they're suffering, because she wants to help them. Fully aware that her actions will lead to her death, she accepts it out of her own free will. Even though she's convinced that a fulfilled life is one of selfishness, she sacrifices herself and is content with that. At first, Ymir's actions, leaving Krista and joining Reiner and Berthold, seem completely unreasonable. We just cannot understand why she would side with the enemy. But eventually, as we continue the story, we realize what she had always known about the world. She knew that purity was gonna fall, that it was only a matter of time. She knew that all too well, and decided to do the quote-unquote right thing. Ymir is the kind of person who swears she'll live for herself, but at her core, she's drawn to protecting others. As shown with the Marleyan authorities, she took all the blame herself. Ymir knows she's only got a second chance at life because she happened to eat Reiner's friend Marcel. That accident, that single moment, it freed her from wandering as a mindless titan for eternity. And in her eyes, that's a debt, like a favor she has to repay, even if it means siding with people she doesn't fully trust. The tragedy of Ymir is that even though she wants to be selfish and stop lying to herself, her nature keeps pulling her back to selflessness. So what we've understood until now is that selflessness is what it comes down to in a good person, but it should be chosen out of free will, not weakness, because if the force of selflessness isn't channeled toward a higher goal, you end up feeling like a victim, and if you choose a selfish goal, you risk becoming a monster. The balance lies in taking both forces, selfishness and selflessness, and channeling them into your purpose by choosing a selfless goal and being selfish about achieving it. And while there is a vague objective understanding for what's right and wrong, it is our responsibility to judge each situation and act accordingly. There is no definitive playbook or magic formula for life, other than to judge each situation in the moment, and your answer for each of those situations may differ from mine. Should Thorfinn have picked up the sword? Should Kaneki have fought back? Should Griffith have not commenced the eclipse? Should Lelouch not have started his rebellion? Should Ymir have stayed with the Survey Corps? And more importantly, what should you do? What kind of person do you want to be? Because in the end, we all have to choose what kind of person we want to be. And as displayed with all the characters and great stories earlier, everyone is a hero in their own story. And the only thing a story is a perspective. For reference, Annie in Attack on Titan didn't kill for pleasure. She was just born on the other side of the wall. She was raised with different truths, different loyalties, a different perspective of what it meant to be good. And yet, despite all of that indoctrination she went through, and despite all the trauma, a part of her still knew what was right and what not. A part we call human nature. Humanity, or goodness, as broad of a term as it is, it lives inside of every one of us. And every time we encounter it, we can choose it. Choose what kind of person we want to become like, and choose what a good person means for us. If we look at Armin from AOT, he doesn't deem himself to be a good person, despite us, the audience, seeing him as just that, because paradoxically he is such a good person that he can see that what he is doing is wrong. He knows that it's evil to blow up that marine ship, for example, but chooses to do so because he also knows that inactivity would be even worse. He needs to do evil to defeat a bigger evil, which brings us back to the greater evil paradox, Lelouch's ideology, and shows us that the word good doesn't mean anything unless you ask, good for who?